Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be making, it's a sew along for pattern 79045. This is going to be an awesome clutch which you can use to accessorize any outfit that you have for the day. I made these in a few different colors, as you can see. It is fully decked out with a few card pocket holders, or credit card holders I should say. It has a phone pocket holder as well as a zippered pocket within the clutch. Super easy. Definitely follow along. If you have any questions, drop them down below and let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing you're going to need, of course, is a pair of scissors, fabric scissors as well as paper scissors, needle nose pliers, which will be used for your magnetic closure, which you can purchase from my Etsy shop. You will need a zipper. It's only 7 inches long. You're gonna need some hand sewing needles, tracing wheel, tracing paper, tracing carbon paper, snippers, pins, regular thread for your sewing machine, and then we're gonna use this more on the hefty side. Is kind of like upholstery thread, 100% polyester. The difference between the two is the density. The all-purpose thread is a lot thinner than the upholstery thread. At least that's what I'm calling it. It's a lot thinner, as you can see. We're gonna use the upholstery thread so that we can hand sew the bag close in the end. It's one of the last steps that we do. So then you're going to need your shelf fabric, lining fabric, lightweight fusible interfacing, as well as your foam interfacing. Now it does adhere to one side, so just be sure you get one that has the the sticky side. And oh, you're also going to need a piece of felt, which I forgot to add in the images. To get started, make sure you add all of your notches onto your fabric, so transfer everything over. As you can see here, I'm using different types of markings to let me know where the top of the pleat is, where it needs to be folded to, and where the bottom of the pleat is. If you do that, it'll make it super easy when you're actually going to the next step when it comes time to iron. I figured out that it's easier for you to iron out the top edges first, and then you can fold those top edges upwards to make the bottom edge of where the actual credit card is gonna sit. So once you fold over, then you fold upwards, and you continue doing that. Try to keep a steady hand, that way your pockets are nice and even, because it will show if it starts to get crooked and uneven. So just keep a steady hand. The iron, again, is your best friend, and iron as much as you possibly can. This pattern here is pattern 8. Once you're done, it should look a little something like this, nice and clean and crisp. Everything should be nice and even and parallel, going straight across. From here, go ahead and start sewing the top of those creases straight across. You are going to do an edge stitch, so from the edge you should be stitching about 1/8 of an inch over on that fold. You're going to do that for each crease. Once you're done, we're going to move on to pattern 3 and edge stitch straight across on pattern 3 as well. From here, grab your snippers and clean off the threads on pattern 3 as well as pattern 8. Now that the card pockets are stabilized, we are going to pin them down and add in a stay stitch. The stay stitch will be just regular stay stitching 1/2 inch from the edge. Go steady. Make sure that your pleats aren't shifting over and they're not starting to give yourself a different variation, a different spacing between each. Once you're done, you're going to do that for both sides. Make sure that your spacing from the edge is a 1/2 inch. My sewing machine happens to have the seam allowance marked on both sides. Not a lot of sewing machine does. This is one of my old ones. It works better than some of my new ones. So I like to use it. But flip your fabric around, do whatever you need to do. Just make sure that your seam allowance stays true at a 1/2 inch for the stay stitching on both sides. Now that the credit card is complete, we're gonna continue on with the phone pocket. Lay your tracing paper down on sewing pattern 3, and this time we are going to get that middle stitch line that divides the phone pocket and the actual pin pocket. Use your tracing wheel, mark it, and from there we will center pattern 3 onto pattern 6. Make sure that you are using it on the right side and make sure that it is fitting from the bottom edge. Add as many pins as needed, and from this point you are going to stitch a perimeter line around the actual marking that you made with your tracing paper. Be sure to sink your needle when you are pivoting around from the top edge to the other side. Go across maybe like 1 or 2 stitches. Sink your needle again before you start, otherwise you'll create a gap in your stitch line. Now that pattern 3 is attached to pattern 6, we are going to add our actual credit card pockets onto the left side of 3 and 6. Use your pins, pin them in place, make sure that it's nice and straight, and it should be perfectly even. And then from there you can top stitch right onto the stay stitch that we added on pattern 8. It should be at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I find it easier for me to put the credit card pockets at the top versus the bottom, but it's up to you. Whatever works, just make sure that your pockets are staying nice and even. You don't want them shifting while you're sewing. Now that that's complete, we are going to attach pattern 7 onto pattern 8. Again, this is going to be on the left side. The reason why that tab is there is so that when we sew our lining onto the shell of the fabric, there isn't a bulk towards that, you know, that left side because of all the folds from the credit card pocket. Now that that's complete, you can go ahead and use your credit card. Make sure that it's fitting properly and fold your seam allowance over so that it's moving away from the credit card holder pocket. And then you are gonna do an edge stitch. Now, this technically is an edge stitch, but because the spacing is a 1/4 inch, it would simply be a top stitch. You're gonna do that on both sides. Just make sure that the actual seam allowance is folding away from the actual pockets. Because if you sew on top of the pockets, you'll make the opening of the pocket too small and then your credit cards won't fit. So stabilize it and make sure that you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. From here, we are going to be working with pattern 5 and pattern 4. Make sure that pattern 5 is face up and pattern 4 is face down. So you should have right sides to right sides, of course. Now, using your tracing paper, you should have already marked the markings on pattern 5 and 4 for your actual zipper opening. So if you don't have it, be sure to do that now. You're not able to see it on mine, but it is indeed there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and darken it a little bit better so that you can see. Make sure that it matches perfectly from pattern 4 to pattern 5. Use as many pins as needed so that you can stabilize. And then from there, we are going to sew that perimeter stitch all around. Once your stitch is complete, grab your snippers, and this time we are going to cut open the little line that is in between our perimeter. Be careful so that you don't cut yourself and that you're not cutting the stitch marks that we made. Once you get to the corner, you are going to cut into a triangle so that it is right to the stitch line, but not passing it, not going beyond it. If you go beyond the stitch line, then you'll have to make your perimeter stitch bigger, and you don't want to do that, so please be careful. Once you have clipped those edges, go ahead and turn the pocket inside out. Use your iron, that way you make everything nice and smooth. I must admit that this part will take a little bit of handling for you to really get it to lay flat. But take your time, use your iron. I'm telling you, your iron, girl, is your best friend. Okay, lay those edges nice and flat. That way you can attach your zipper. Taking time to do this step will show, so it gives you such a big difference in the end. So go ahead and grab your zipper and just stay stitch the upper edge of the zipper closed. That way when you try to stabilize it into the opening of your zippered pocket, it doesn't give you any hassle. There's a little tidbit that I learned from a friend of mine who makes clutches. Nonetheless, from there, this is what it's looking like, and you are going to center that zipper right into that opening. I like to hide the zipper stopper right in the back. It should only be about less than 1/4 of an inch, so about 3/8. So when you're sewing that perimeter, you just need to make sure that you go around it. That way you don't break your needle. But using your pins, go ahead and pin all around. Try to get your pins to go in one direction. I didn't do that for this, so I kept stabbing myself when I was going around, which I don't know why I didn't pay attention to how I was pinning it, but I just put my pins all types of ways. Don't do that, okay? Be better. Be better. Anyway, using your zipper foot, go ahead and sew all around the perimeter of your zipper. Be careful when you are going around the corner. I always say it's best for you to start on the long side versus starting on the short side. That way when you go all the way around, you can always just stitch right over your previous line, and it will allow you to close that stitch line. And that completes your perimeter stitch. If you want, you can always tie little knots there just so that those threads, they don't open up. But besides that, your zipper is good to go. This is what it's looking like. So now go ahead and take pattern 4, fold it back over onto itself, and you're going to take pattern 5 and just move it out of the way because we're going to close the pouch, which is pattern 4. Fold pattern 5 over out of the way. Use pins so that pattern 4 is being kept together. Right now you have it folded, and this is how you are going to make your zippered pouch. Make sure it's pinned nice and even. Make sure all edges are aligned. You're going to add those pins all the way around, and then starting from the bottom corner, you're going to back stitch, move upwards at 1/2 inch. You're going to go all the way up. Catch the little triangular tidbit that's left over from pattern 5, and then you're going to sew across the seam allowance for the opening, go back down, around, again over that little triangular tidbit, and also backstitch on the other end. Call it a day. Alright, so this is what it should be looking like. Your pouch is complete. The next thing to do would be to attach the closure to your main lining piece and attach that to pattern 4 and 5. So we're going to attach pattern 9 to the top of 6, 8, and 7, and then the bottom of 7, 8, and 3 will be attached to the top of pattern 5. You can sew those straight across. Your seam allowance for this will be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Piece of felt, if you didn't have it already, and match it up with the upper edge of your lining, and from there you can go ahead and add your marking, transfer your marking over for the actual placement of the magnetic closure. Using the inner part of the magnetic closure, you're going to stabilize it right in the center of where it is supposed to be. Use a pen and mark those rectangular openings. The reason to why we're marking them is so that we can use our exacto knife or the snippers to cut those opens. The prongs need to fit in between there, that way it stabilizes from the back side. So once you have the marking, you can go ahead and remove it, and I went ahead and just stabilized my felt fabric down, that way it stays in place. And when you cut with the exacto blade, you want to be able to go all the way through with the blade. It needs to cut all the way through so that it pierces through the actual felt. Be careful, that way you don't put a huge gash in your material. You just need an opening that is big enough for the prongs, so please be careful. From there, on the right side, you're going to take the smaller portion of the magnetic closure, insert the prongs through the hole, and the little piece that we had used, the backing, in order to mark those placements, we're going to insert onto the prongs. Using your needle pliers, you can go ahead and press them down. I usually just use my fingers because they're kind of soft. They're not going to hurt your finger. But if you don't want to use your hands, just go ahead and use your needle nose pliers or a pair of scissors or something flat, just so that you can press them down. I don't think it matters whether you press it inwards or outwards. I personally just like to press it outwards. Here, go ahead and pin your lining to your shell. Make sure that they are right sides together, and go ahead and flip your material over. That way you are actually sewing with your interface. Your foam interface needs to be up, so that way you can see what you're doing. Starting from the bottom edge, from the very edge notch, from the notch, you're gonna backstitch and sew along the perimeter of your interface. Be sure to keep an eye on your lining, that way it doesn't shift out of place. And once you go all around the actual clutch, when you come back down to the bottom, make sure that you backstitch, but definitely keep an eye on your interfacing and your lining. Make sure that you're not stitching over the interface, and make sure that your lining is not shifting out of place. Now that it's completely sewn, take a look at your sewing pattern because it will have the areas where you need to trim. But go ahead and trim those areas and turn your bag inside out. Be delicate with this because depending on the material, like how I'm using a twill fabric, it frays a whole lot. So if you're not careful, when you are clipping, you could clip beyond the point, beyond that stitch mark. And when you're turning it over, it can really fray and come apart. But from here, once you have it turned inside out, go ahead and use your iron it nice and flat. Be sure to add those creases so that the bag already is molded into where it's supposed to fold. I like to add the closure, the secondary magnetic closure, once I've turned it inside out, because sometimes if you do it beforehand, it doesn't line up properly. So by doing it once you are done turning the bag inside out, you have a better placement and a better indication of where to mark and where to add your secondary magnetic closure. Like before, you'll have to use the interior backing in order for you to mark where you need to add your little slits. So I went ahead, grabbed the metal ruler, that way I don't make a hole through the actual lining, and using my exacto blade, I went ahead and cut those little slits that we use that are in the center of the backing. From there, you can go ahead and put the actual magnetic closure through, make the prongs go through those little holes that you just made, and make sure it goes all the way through. The foam is a bit tough for you to make a hole through it, but because it's foam, it almost as if it closes up. And those prongs, they're kind of round. So work it in and then use that backing, put it in place. Make sure you flatten it out all the way, and that pretty much wraps it up. Now, side note, I went ahead and I used a little bit of, what is that called? E600, 6000. I don't remember what it's called. Oh, wait, it's next to me. Yeah, E6000. It's an adhesive. And I added some underneath the closure. It's not necessary for you to put it there, but I thought it gave it just a little bit of extra security. Especially since that material, it has a tendency of fraying, and I didn't want to take any chances, so I added a little bit. You don't have to use that. You can use this if you are going to use it. You could use it on the upper section too of the magnetic closure, but it's not necessary for you to do so. Just like before, press the prongs down, and then from here we're going to iron it out one more time, and then we will start creating our ladder stitch. You said goodbye like everything's gone, everything that we could have been. To start the ladder stitch, the first thing you're going to do is thread up your needle. Always make sure you put a knot at the end because you don't want it to unravel. So tuck your seam allowance inwards, and what you're going to do is start by inserting the needle through the inside of the material and starting probably a few stitches beyond the opening. So you should be starting on the stitch. Next thing you're going to do is insert the needle through one side of the material, giving yourself 3/8 of an inch, if not smaller. And then you're going to zigzag it back and forth onto each side. As you do this, you will create what's called a ladder. And then from there, you can tug on the actual needle in order to tighten up that stitch. When you tug on the needle to tighten the stitch, it will pull both sides close, and it'll give you a seamless line as if there's no stitches there. Nice and clean, just like that. Take your time with this process. Make sure that you aren't creating the ladder stitches on a type of zigzag where it's not going straight across. Try to keep your ladder lines, even and parallel, I should say. Once you're done, go ahead and make a knot, tie it, and secure the end of that. I like to keep going just a little bit further beyond the opening, just so that I know, it's nice and secure. But once you're done with that, you're gonna close it up. Of course, clip your thread, make a new knot, and this time you're gonna start on the side. If you iron it nice and flat, the crease would already be there. It'll make it a whole lot easier for you to do it. Besides that, that is it, folks. Congratulations on making your own clutch. Try these in different variations. Thunder, I'm recording. But I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, comment down below if you have any questions. Definitely check out the Etsy shop for more sewing patterns. Until next time, happy sewing.